Hey, welcome into a special bonus episode of Texans on Top. Texans on Tap, not Texans on Top. That was probably Freudian. It's a bombshell edition, Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange alongside Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Follow Charlie on X at Palillo and read him weekly on sportsmap.com. Follow Josh on X at JoshJordan975. Read him daily on sportsmap.com. If you're excited about the Texans in 2024, hit like on this video right now and show your support. And please make sure you hit subscribe so you're with us and see our content in your feed as we ramp up to the draft. And we're going to be talking about that, breaking it down, talking OTAs, then training camp, and then football is back in all its glory. And we hope you're along for the ride. And we hope we're along the ride with you. So let's just start out with, wow, Nick Caserio shoved here. Texans trade for Stephon Diggs. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say, when I said at the top, it's a bombshell for many reasons. Before we get into the draft implications and the culture questions that are going to be natural with this, let's just start with the guys on the field. Where does this put the Texans as far as receiving core? Just forget the division. Did they just put the entire AFC on notice?
With the exception of the Kansas City Chiefs, who wear the crown quite firmly, the Texans have a so-called skill position group, term I've never liked. Offensive linemen have skills, but this is a wow, certainly on the surface, and we'll peel some layers here. But, I mean, come on. Fresh after the Texans set off another fetid stink bomb at Roof Closed, Minute Maid Park. Breathe in the sweet smell of another really positive Texans move.
Yeah. For me, they're up there. In the division, I don't even think it's really that close now. And with Nico and Tank, as long as they're healthy, this is going to be a nasty, nasty receiving core to deal with. So, yeah, they're up there. They know what it takes. You got to score points. They've got the money right now with CJ on the rookie contract. So they're going all in.
You've got the roster as it stands right now on the offensive side. You've got CJ Stroud, Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, with Bobby Slowick calling the shots here. This team is, we're talking about blockbuster. This team wasn't even as relevant as a blockbuster video just 3 seasons ago. And now, you're talking about the national talking heads are talking about Super Bowl aspirations. Are we getting ahead of ourselves, or is this team built to contend right here, right now? Obviously, they still have pieces left to make to maneuver on the draft here, but can it be overstated what Nick Caserio has done here in a short amount of time?
No, and in April, if there's a time to be unbridledly optimistic, this is the time. And certainly for a Texans fan base, which after 3 years, not even on the fringe of being lost in the desert, this is a giant oasis. I'll stick with the caveat: Kansas City Chiefs, until someone takes them down, different category. Unless Mahomes ups and retires or gets injured, the Chiefs are still clearly the team to unseat. But in the everybody else bracket in the AFC, Baltimore's taken numerous hits this offseason, right? Close to 2023, the Texans were a long ways behind the Ravens, right? Baltimore kicked their ass to start the Texan season and kicked their ass to end the Texan season. Well, the Ravens have lost multiple O-line starters, multiple defensive starters, Jadeveon Clowney recently among them. They still have a core, and they still have Lamar Jackson. But the gap, if not completely wiped out, it has dramatically narrowed relative to the Texans and Ravens. The Texans' power of incumbency alone, along with this offseason, they're the clear class of the AFC South. Beyond the Chiefs in the AFC West, nobody. And in the AFC East, the Bills, if not in retrenchment, I'm not going to say their window is closed. Josh Allen's still in his late 20s, not his late 30s, but I don't think the needle's pointing up for the Bills. The Dolphins have taken some serious free agent cap problem hits, and the Jets and Patriots are moot points unless Aaron Rodgers has an October, November, and December miracle in store for the NFL. So you can very plausibly argue that entering the 2024 season, the Texans are the second best bet to win the AFC.
Wow, that that is amazing to say something like that, isn't it? You talked about the Dolphins. They have pretty darn good receivers too. With Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Brandon, you asked about some other receiving groups. 49ers, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and of course Deebo Samuel. Texans kind of patterned themselves off the 49ers a little bit, so this makes sense there. I mean, they're loaded. I do wonder, what does this mean for Nico Collins, who's coming up on a contract after this year? Is this going to preclude them from extending him if he has another Pro Bowl type season? Texans cap, I saw on Twitter, believes that they're going to do redo this contract for Diggs, similar to what they did for Joe Mixon when they traded for him just a while back ago. So I'm curious to see how this kind of shifts things, but I get why they did it. With Tank Dell missing a lot of time last year, Nico missed some time, and they didn't have a lot to throw to when those guys were injured. So I get why they wanted to, go for it here and add a 4-time Pro Bowler to the roster. So it makes a lot of sense. I hope it works for him. There are some red flags with Diggs, though, and I'm sure we'll get into those a little later.
Yeah, the risk reward overwhelmingly favors the Texans on this. It shouldn't impact Collins at all, right? This is a 25-year-old who, unless he goes back to being hurt and marginally productive this coming season, that's a guy you lock up, right? Diggs is on the wrong side of 30. There's no question this is one of those diva wide receivers. It happened in Minnesota. It happened in Buffalo. You can't question the productivity. 4 consecutive 100-catch seasons. Yet, last third of last season, the Bills started playing him less. His snap counts were down as he was squawking. If he's not constantly being fed, he gripes. He doesn't come here and become the number 1 receiver off the season that Nico Collins had. I think the Texans hope on this, that Diggs year 1, it's another honeymoon, and playing with CJ Stroud, it'll be all good feelings. And I think Diggs probably should have a healthier respect for Nico Collins than any other receiver he had for in Buffalo. I mean, Gabe Davis did some nice things, but there was no one else in Buffalo that Diggs probably thought should ever be seeing the ball before he saw the ball. Dawson Knox is a tight end. Whereas here, he should be able to look at the Texans depth chart. You referenced Tank Dell as a home run hitter, giving him health. They re-signed Noah Brown. They have John Mechie. There's your 5-man wide receiver core. The contract is rich. I wouldn't want to be extending and committing more money down the road. It's $18 million per year, but the Texans can pretty much get out of it after 1 year. I would want to see if Diggs shows slippage, right? He had his lowest yards per catch in 4 seasons, but he also had at least 8 touchdown catches for a 4th consecutive season. But if it doesn't go well, why set yourself up for salary cap liability? They can get out at under $4 million dead money in 2025 as it stands. And if you're looking to create additional space for now or for the Nico Fund, to me, going into the offseason, Robert Woods was very vulnerable as a solid pro, but dicey health, dicey production. The Texans can create an additional $5 million in cap space, almost $5 million in cap space, if they cut the guy who now would project to be their number 6 wide receiver.
And that's what I was thinking too, Charlie. I agree with you about why don't you see how Diggs does and then worry about it later. But that's what I thought with Joe Mixon. He only had 1 year left on his deal at a pretty reasonable number, around $6 million, and then went and gave him a 3-year contract extension. So it just concerns me that seems to be kind of a pattern here for Caserio, that he wants to redo these deals. And if you're giving up a 2nd-round pick, that's pretty sporty to pay for a rental for 1 season.
Agreed. But since Diggs has shown problem child tendencies in 2 previous stops, I don't want to mollify him by giving him a fresh batch of guaranteed money. Right? The Bills are eating more than $30 million in dead cap space. $30 million, as they clearly decided to dump Diggs. They get a decent return, and in a wide receiver rich draft, they're going to take his replacement in the first couple rounds almost certainly. But they were so desperate or desirous of getting rid of Diggs 1 year after signing him to a 4-year extension. They take a $30 million dead cap hit to move on from the guy. So obviously not all wine and roses, but again, risk reward, Texans in go for it mode. And Josh alluded to, as we have previously here repeatedly, these are the kind of shots you can fire without lingering damage while you have Stroud on the cheap of his rookie contract.
Yeah, my big concern here is just, do the Bills know something the Texans don't? Not just the off the field stuff. A lot of the complaints from Diggs, his teammates have backed him up, but I will say he complained after that loss to the Bengals in the playoffs in the 2022 season, said he didn't get enough targets. He had 10 in that game. Is he going to get 10 targets a game with the Texans going forward? I'm not so sure about that. And then the other thing is just how he finished the season. Last year, his ADOT, his average depth of target, was down almost a full yard from the season before. And then Charlie mentioned the last third of the season. Part of that was because they had an offensive coordinator change, so they weren't throwing the ball as much as Charlie talked about. But he finished, let's see, after week 6 of last year, he had 0 100-yard games. He went 13 straight games, including the playoffs, to finish the season without a 100-yard game. So that worries me a little bit.
But this is a guy who overall track record is a polished route runner, plays the ball well, right? Dell is your stretch the field guy. Collins is an all-around, just prototype physical wide receiver. Diggs should be able to work that middle of the field. I don't mean the little underneath drags exclusively. He's more than a Wes Welker, Danny Amendola type ever was. But Diggs should be a very good complement, an ideal complement in the type of wide receiver he is, with Nico Collins, with Tank Dell, with Dalton Schultz. And if you can further spread the field out, that opens up the shorter stuff to incorporate that running back in your passing game. We should at least include the Texans' offensive line still has question marks in its interior. So whether that can take on increased emphasis with a higher priority draft pick, they still have defensive tackle and secondary to hit on, you think, with their first couple of picks, starting in the second round since they moved out of the first. But moving out of the first also saved them a couple of $1 million of cap space. Overall, this has just been a phenomenally exciting offseason. Everyone needs to just play nicely together in the sandbox and have it all work.
After my criticism, I do want to say some positive things here. We talked about his last stretch of 2023 not being very good with 100-yard games. When we look back at 2022, he went 6 straight games to finish the season without a 100-yard game, except for the final game of the regular season where he went over 100 against the Patriots. So if we're looking at this from a positive way, he has stretches like this at the end of the season in his history here during really good seasons. 2022 was phenomenal. Last year, he was good, not as good. But so we've seen that from him before. So that doesn't necessarily mean he's declining. I think that's a positive thing. And then I saw Daniel Jeremiah tweet out. He does all the draft work for the NFL Network. And he was like, Joe Mixon is about to see a lot of light boxes this year with this receiving group out there. I think Joe Mixon can capitalize on this.
Well, I think the depth now of the receiving core really opens up. It should, I don't know if this is the correct term for depressurize. I think every weapon that CJ has around there. So they don't necessarily need him to be, the number one, not when you have Nico and Tank out there and, Schultz also as a target. But you guys alluded to it. Let's dig into that just a little bit further. There's a reason why Diggs was available. There's a reason why the Bills were so willing to take that massive cap hit. He famously had issues with Josh Allen. Clearly, Nick Caserio believes Ryans and Stroud are up to the challenge. Do you guys think that D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud are up to the challenge and cementing the culture to get him to buy in here?
Enough so to at least take the shot for 1 year. And going back to why I would not be looking to do an extension and throw another chunk of guaranteed money Diggs' way. He does turn 31 later in the coming season. But the bona fides are the bona fides. And you hope that your culture will help him buy in. You don't know what Diggs' level of self-awareness is. Does he say to himself, geez, the Bills were willing to eat $30 million of dead cap space to get rid of me? No, he's probably thinking, hey, I've been football paroled, and nothing against Josh Allen, but I'm more stoked to play with CJ Stroud. And the Bills, we were good for a while, but never got to that next level. With the Texans, we're going to do that, and I'm going to be a part. And, I'm here for one reason. I'm here to win. Well, how many guys say that? And winning on their terms is what they're really here for. So we'll see if Diggs has a new phase of professional maturity. But I think in year one, it's a good Texans bet.
And Charlie, you touched on draft implications here. There's clearly not a imperative for a wide receiver anymore. So does the focus of the draft now become that much more defensive intensive?
With the caveat of guard, of an interior offensive lineman meets the best player available criterion when the Texans are on the board, then I say take that guy, because I don't want to put any eggs in the basket just post Easter in the Kenyon Green basket. I mean, maybe his career actually starts in season 3. Juice Scruggs, I'm fine with getting the shot at center. Shaq Mason's certainly going to be their right guard, but he's also a little long in the tooth. So if there's a guard they really like, I'm fine with that. But a defensive tackle, right? They added Folakasi and Autry while losing Collins and Rankins. They could still use one more D tackle for the rotation. And secondary, right? Stingley's your stud when healthy. They take a shot with Jeff Okudah. They could use another cornerback, and I think safety is a question mark. They have it better covered with depth there, but what is Jalen Petrie going to be in his third season, coming off a very disappointing sophomore year? Jimmy Ward, old and too oft injured. I wouldn't count on him. Re-signed Eric Murray, bring back Lonnie Johnson, re-signed Desmond King. So I would actually have corner a hair ahead of safety on the priority board, but secondary and the trenches, O-line, D-line, interior of both, I would think are their 3 top areas of need.
We're not that far removed from the Bill O'Brien saga, the Jack Easterby era. The times in which this team's reputation has been toxic, to say the least. Now, you've got national heads praising Nick Caserio and talking about this rebuild. We're not even talking about ownership anymore. I guess this is as good of a day and as good of a move as any to kind of take a step back and look at the rehabilitation of the image of the franchise. I mean, can we really believe that they're at this place now? I mean, they were at the laughing stock. They were being joked about being a UFL team or being worse than an XFL team not that long ago with, consecutive one and done coaches, head coaches. And yet here we are now talking about they're putting the league on notice. Like, can it be overstated, the reputational rehabilitation than Nick Caserio? And we should give ownership to Cal McNair too. They clearly have had a concerted effort into listening to the fans and trying to right the ship here. Can that be overstated at this point?
Not really. Gross simplification, but CJ Stroud. I mean, D'Amico Ryan's right behind him, but CJ Stroud, number 1, because if you can't get quarterback fixed, you can be doing a lot of other good things, but you're pretty much a hamster running on a wheel, not getting anywhere. But then you add CJ Stroud, elite quarterback play, basically out of the chute and on the contract that he's on. The NFL is built to enable these massive turnarounds. That's why pretty much every year, certainly on average, every year, a team goes from last place in its division to first place in its division. The Bengals went from 4-12 to the Super Bowl the very next season, right? The Texans from where they went in 3 consecutive seasons to 10-7, winning a division and now being at least a secondary Super Bowl contender. So the NFL is structured for this level of parity and the chance for rapid fire turnarounds. It's just that, hey, it's finally happening here.
It is. And it's really unbelievable. I was hoping we were going to be able to get Josh back in. Josh had some power issues at his house. So unfortunately, lights flickered, and we all know how it is when the internet goes out. So we'll wrap it there. Charlie, I want to say thank you for, jumping in and having, talking with us this afternoon on short notice, because we definitely wanted to react to this. I mean, it doesn't really get bigger than this you're talking about a blockbuster move for a franchise that really puts them over the top. So that's going to be it for this bonus episode of Texans on Tap. Appreciate everyone for jumping in. We had a great viewership today, and thanks for everybody for interacting with the show. We'll talk to you soon. And as always, go Texans.